Welcome to the Ellevate podcast, conversations with women changing the face of business. And now your hosts, Kristy, Wallace, and Maricella, Herrera.
Hello and welcome to the Ellevate podcast. This is your host, Kristy Wallace, with my co-host, Maricella Herrera. Maricella, I'm very curious to know where you are right now and what the state of that space is looking like.
I am in my apartment that I lived in for 6 years and which I am moving out of this weekend. So basically I am, it feels, when kids make forts out of boxes
Yes.
and like things, I'm
Yes,
sure your
yes,
kids do that. Well, that's how it feels right now. I'm like in a fort of crates. There's like crates and bins and boxes all around me. And it's a little claustrophobic. I'm not going to lie.
Well, just for a short time longer, right? And then you'll be on to new adventures.
Yeah. I'm moving out on Sunday to my new place. And it's interesting. Like I love my apartment. I love my neighborhood. I've been, like I said, here 6 years. Like it's been a big chunk of time. And it's having spent the last 5 months working from home and like on my own here, like it really did make me think of what my priorities were and what I wanted my space to be. We talk about like how things have changed in the last year, 6 months, however long this has been, decade, it feels like a really long time. But, and how, things have changed. I know you've been hyping up about the virtual events and how much you have enjoyed them. I've discovered I like cooking and therefore needed an apartment with more of a kitchen. I don't know. I guess we get to know a little bit more of ourselves when we're in this situation.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly true. During times of change in our lives and in the world, there's an aspect of vulnerability and self-awareness, that really shines through. And we'll talk about that, in the podcast today with Cate Luzio, who's the founder of Luminary. We're also going to be talking about that at Mobilize Women Week as well. We have a panel specifically on, navigating change and when priorities change, and speaking with some really inspirational, thought leaders just around navigating change and what that looks like and how we manage that. It's, I think, a great conversation for anyone who's leading a business, managing a team, regardless of if you're working within an organization or you are running your own business. There's been a lot of changes, changing priorities, changing business models and plans, really looking at how we are resilient and we're innovative. It's something that I've been Cate talks about the power of her team quite a bit, and I couldn't agree with her more. She's got a great team at Luminary, and we've seen that at Ellevate as well, just, the strength of our team to really come together and to support each other during this time. And, for us specifically, we went from 100 in-person events, and that's just one piece of what we do at Ellevate, but moving that into a virtual space, while we also are running our Squads program, which is an online peer mentoring program. I know many of our listeners have participated in that program or have heard us talk about it, but it's really understanding, how do you build community, relationships, understanding, support in a virtual space and during a time when, there is so much noise. How do you really create that differentiation and that value that keeps people coming back? And I've been really inspired by what we've accomplished, specifically with our weekly roundtables. I'm near and dear to my heart is our corporate executive roundtable. I've just learned so much. You hear me talk about it all the time, but seeing what Luminary's done, what Ellevate's done, what many of us have been able to do during this time, just shows the resilience of entrepreneurs, and if I'm being partial, of women entrepreneurs.
I would agree with that.
Yep, that is so true. Yes, community. All right, let's get to my conversation with Cate. Cate, thanks so much for joining us today on the Ellevate podcast.
Thanks for having me, Kristy. I'm excited to be back.
I know. So always one of my favorite guests and favorite people. You are the founder and CEO of Luminary, which is a fantastic partner of Ellevate. But more personally, you and I have really been close friends, and you've shown me just the power of having others in your corner during this time and always, and how that really helps us navigate as leaders. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and say thank you.
Well, right back at you. Because it's the same. The feeling is mutual.
And so as we're talking about navigating these times, we both have businesses that were just heavily impacted during COVID and the pandemic. We, Ellevate, obviously, we were doing a lot of in-person events and pivoting that online. But you run Luminary, which is a community space in New York City. And I would love for you to talk a little bit more about Luminary and some of the decisions you had to make and changes you made during March and into the future.
Yeah, so it has been a wild ride. We are just a little over 18 months old as a company. As you know, I left a very long career in banking and decided that I wasn't seeing enough advancement of women in the workplace, much like Ellevate, looking across all industries, not just financial services, where I spent, again, the majority of my career. And I started Luminary as a physical community. We opened really early 2019, focused on all women. So whether you were in corporate America, you were in nonprofit, you were a teacher, you're a solopreneur, a small business owner, but really bringing women together to cross-pollinate ideas and information, but in a physical space. And our first location has been in New York. Really in the heart of Nomad, and everything is built on programming and content and connection. So really, this idea of supporting one another, inspiring one another, and giving each other that extra leg up through community. Last year, we did over 200 in-person workshops, events, and programs, which is about 3 to 4 a week, which is a lot, and that was great. That was our first year in operation. January and February of this year, we were growing. It was great because we support, again, much like Ellevate, as a great partner, individuals and corporate members. And then March happened. So running a physical space and a physical community that's less about co-working and more about connection and opportunity and really driving that ecosystem of women supporting women. We before we even shut down the physical space, we pivoted online, and it was almost overnight. I have to say, my team is incredible. I think that's such an important part of anyone's success in their business. I don't care how small or large you are. It comes down to the team. We got together and said, okay, even through the rest of March, whether this is going to last a few weeks or a month, I'm laughing now thinking about that. We need to put everything online, and we can't stop the engagement that we've got in the support of the community. So before we closed our physical doors on March 20th, temporarily, obviously. And March 16th, we already started our online programming. And then a week later, we had always had an app where our members and the community could connect to each other and search for jobs and post opportunities and their own businesses, et cetera. But we created a Slack channel. We created a private Facebook group because people like to connect differently. And then, I was personally thinking this is only going to be a few weeks, maybe a month. But as we headed into April, it was like, okay, obviously this is not going away. And New York was really in the thick of things. So built a digital platform quite quickly. We had never focused and never had the idea that we were going to be digital. I mean, when I wrote the business plan in 2018, it was all built around physical. And so now we have reopened. We reopened on June 22nd with all of the precautions and necessary safety for our members and our staff and our community. We are both an in-person community here in New York and now online, and are growing, but slowly, because this has been, a roller coaster, Kristy, as you know, and we've talked so many times around. You've got to support your members and your community, which are your customers, but you also have to understand the difficulties and circumstances that they're dealing with too. And a lot of that is job loss. A lot of that is a financial loss. A lot of that is, if you're a small business owner, revenue decline, pivoting your business. And so, as a small business ourselves, we're doing the same thing.
So I have so many questions for you about this, and I love talking to you because you're just always so honest and real, which to me is an important aspect of leadership, and I say that
I agree.
With all sincerity is, the leaders who are shining during this time, I think, are those that really, are leading with their values and are, they care a lot about their customers and their teams. And so on that note, I mean, how did you communicate all of this to your team? What were those conversations like? Because, it's a lot of change, it's a lot of unknowns, and they're looking to you for some of those answers.
So one, I think I have the benefit of having, 20 plus years of experience in corporate America. And I went through 9/11. I went through the financial crisis, which was, very tough, especially as a banker, because of what was happening in the market and to our clients. But certainly, none of the banks didn't go unscathed around, our, resignations, but more importantly, layoffs, et cetera. So I think that really helped. I think going through some tough times in that way, and also having a business plan, I kind of harp on that all the time because it allowed us to pull different levers within our financial projections and our numbers to say, okay, where have we lost revenue? Where can we put more emphasis on? And obviously we didn't have just one line of business or one stream of revenue. We had multiple. So where do you have the biggest gaps and where you're heavily dependent on one versus the other? I think on the team, I've been really open since we launched the business. While not everybody knows the numbers that we have, we're self-funded, right? I have no external backing. I had no funders. I had no investors. So it's been me. One of the early decisions we had to make was, do we lay off staff? And I did not want to do that. One, I knew we had to run our business. And just because we were moving online versus a physical space didn't mean that the amount of work lessened. It just meant that we were no longer in a physical space, running that location. We had to lay off or furlough our part-time staffers, which was so difficult because we didn't know the time frame. But we knew we would hire them back as soon as we could. It just didn't make sense, whether for them or financially. And then I made the team sort of aware and said, we can either do layoffs and I can give you all the opportunity to do a furlough and take unemployment, or you can do a salary reduction. And across the board, everyone jumped in and said, we'll do a salary reduction. So I hats off to my team, again, that really believe in this mission and the business and the community to say, you know what, we're going to financially suffer for a little while for the greater good. I don't take a salary. I've never taken a salary since we launched. So, and then as we headed into, that was all happening as we headed into PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program. So keeping our staff aware of that, we were looking for that, to tap into the stimulus program and applying for grants elsewhere. It was really important to communicate. I was communicating to our community every week throughout this, and literally around everything until the day we reopened our doors. And I had to do the same with our team. And I wanted them to feel empowered to also do that with their staff if they had teams or juniors that were supporting them, but more importantly, to the members of our community.
Well, and then, I always think of this from me to we to the world, it's how are you supporting yourself, which I want to get into that, your teams, but then your customers and more broadly beyond that. Something that a lot of businesses struggled with during this time was, then how do you talk about these changes to your customer, pivots, iterations on the business model? I know you have built a really strong community with Luminary. How did that go in talking to your customers about moving virtual and, continuing to retain them as customers and as supporters?
Well, first, and again, sometimes my honesty is too bold, but, our first month, so when you think about March is sort of, okay, everyone's there and great. April, you still have people that are thinking, well, maybe this is all going to be over by May. So April, we were sort of hanging in. By May, we literally had lost more than 50%, if not more, of our revenue. Some of that was events, right? Because we did a ton of events and that drives revenue. Some of that was members that had to cancel due to, again, they moved out of the city. They had, financial issues. They lost a role. Their partner lost their job, all of that. But you have to understand that. You have to engage and understand individually, sort of what these situations are, which led us really those early losses or pauses even in a membership where we've got to come up with something where we can really, digitally engage. So if you weren't using the space as a co-working or a workspace, but if you were, how do we continue to engage you and give you the support of the community? And which led us to launching our digital membership, again, which is something that we never thought of. There was a lot of personal communication that came directly from me each week, if not once at least, but maybe more, depending on decisions that were happening in the world and then happening certainly for Luminary. But we did a lot of, I don't want to call them surveys, but every time we get members on a community event, and we have one at least once a day, we want their feedback. Right? We want to understand what they're looking for. We want to understand what's missing, where we can do better. And a lot of the ideas that have driven sort of now that we're in August, but June, July, and August came out of those conversations with our members. And I really empower all of our team, not just me, to make sure that they are having open and direct conversations with our members and understanding, what they're looking for in this new world. You know this better than anyone, the childcare issue, right? You can't just leave your house now and go, to an office or to a workspace if you have children, right? Especially in New York City. What's it going to look like in September? So we did multiple town halls. I really think it was down to the, direct communication, talking about the challenges that we were facing and being honest that, as a small business, we don't exist without our customers. And you're seeing that happen across the globe where small businesses are going out of business because they're losing their customers. And I wanted to make clear that while we were there for the community, we hoped that they would be there for us. And, we're now in August and, we have had a lot of financial impact, but we're building that back. I'm cautiously optimistic about the fall and into next year.
Well, let's talk about moving to online. So many of our listeners pivoted their businesses during this time, given obviously the travel restrictions. People were in their homes, so it's okay. How do you reach people in their homes and how do you stay relevant and make that connection? There's been so much around Zoom fatigue. And, I know in the early days it was happy hours and so much going on. And many people, including Ellevate, we all moved into the virtual space and looking to find our lane that, is most relevant and valuable to our customer and is really solving, for what they need during this time. So what are some of the approaches you took around creating something that met the needs of your community and really stood out, differentiated what you're doing?
Well, one of the things that since we've launched, our goal was to make sure that we were a member-led community versus, we direct everything. So even pre-coronavirus, more than 70% of our programming is member-led. So, you coming in as a member of Luminary, you can do a workshop, you can host a program, you can host an event. And that has continued through the coronavirus and this pandemic. Again, we've done over 400 since March 16th. Again, some small workshops, some large events, but all, again, over 70%, that's really driven by and led by the members. And that really shows like a community reinvesting in itself. But the amount of ideas and client opportunities and introductions that come out of that, I think, is a big differentiator for who we are. I also think the diversity of programming, especially over these last 4 or 5 months, most people think of physical spaces as co-working. And I have personally spent a lot of time trying to explain that we are not a traditional co-working space just because we have a physical space with amenities. It's really about the programming in the community. And then our digital membership, now we have members from all over the world, which is, for me, I think pretty fantastic. And, the other thing that I would say is, early on, before this really hit, we had a number of members of Luminary that were saying, my supply chain has stopped because I manufacture in China, or I'm already seeing clients dropping off because of the revenue challenges. How do I amplify my business if I can't go to an event or do a trunk show or, meet with corporates? And so again, hearing those stories and knowing we needed to amplify women-owned businesses much more, especially the small businesses, we created the Luminary Collective, which we're now, I think, over 400 women-owned, women-led, women-founded businesses. Whether you're a product or a service, we don't care if you're part of the Luminary community. All we care about is amplifying your business. And so I think that's been really, again, a nice part of the community supporting each other and amplifying people that they might not have known before, or brands they didn't know about, or services. So, again, and all that doesn't happen by just Cate. That's all of this comes down to the team we have, and it's much more of a family, but making sure that we're listening and engaging, and also being direct and honest. And I think that's also helped us. Unfortunately, we had 12 what we call community partner spaces around the U.S., where instead of us, trying to open up in every single city, that was never going to be my plan. We started collaborating with women's spaces across the country, from DC and Richmond all the way to San Francisco. And of those 12 that we have partnered with, 5 have in the last 2 months announced they're permanently closing. They can't sustain. And so that's been really sad to watch. But we'll continue to build those partnerships. And just like we do with Ellevate, is making sure we're co-curating, co-hosting, and really having the impact that we set out to have when we first started the company.
When we saw the pandemic hit, obviously it had a huge impact on many businesses, and looking at the data, a number of small businesses have not survived, have not been able to weather this time. But then looking into the future, there's a huge market opportunity. And so it's about how you are able to sustain during this downtime, to really come out the other end when you're going to see the uptick, you're going to see that growth. But it's those downtimes that are really hard. And even not in a pandemic world, I mean, the business of starting and growing businesses is oftentimes like that. It's not the hockey stick growth or the straight growth that we often, hear about, but there's many ups and downs based on a number of variables, if it's seasonality, if it's what's happening in the world and the markets, within your customer base. And it's about how you're able to kind of be resilient during those downtimes to continue staying the course for the longer term vision.
And I will say that, starting this company, 18 months ago, 2 years ago, when we started building the space, was hard. And I thought that was the hardest thing I'll ever do. This is harder, right? You've built it and it's going well. And I think people out there don't really understand, if they've never started a small company or been an entrepreneur. Everything's hard, right? You've got to give it your all, but now you're sort of turning around a company, making sure you survive. And, we don't have investors. So it's on my shoulders to make sure that my team gets paid, that they're getting paid what they're worth, that we're hiring, that we're providing jobs and economic opportunity. But at the same time, it is hard. It's exhausting. It's frustrating. And, we don't hear a lot about that. We really don't. And the mental health impact overall of just that, you've got the pandemic, you've got being at home. If you're a working parent, it's even harder. And then just sort of trying to make sure that your company survives. There will be plenty of stories, I'm sure, in the next couple of months about this. But, I talk about it now because I think it's important that we share that we don't know it all, and we're struggling just like everybody else. And we have to lean on each other and lean into our networks for that guidance and support, like I do with you.
I know, but I think it's really important that we do talk about that. It's not easy. And, there's certain things you go to your team for, or your friends, but really having that peer network of others who are going through the same thing, having the same experiences. But, when we were navigating PPE, for example, I went to you and you had such deep experience. And then I hope that I've been able to return that favor with my own, insights and expertise. But that's about, kind of that give and take and being able to not feel so alone. which is something you talk about quite a bit, and it's incredibly important, is, being honest about what it means and what that experience is like as a leader, and especially a leader during these times.
And that opportunity we have as leaders to be open and honest to not only our teams, our peers, our customers, our mentors. I think it's important because none of us are in this alone, right? We say we're in this together. And if you don't leverage the togetherness, then you're really, at the end of the day, harming yourself, because that's what your networks, and I say networks because we have so many individual networks of our own. That's what they're there for.
Are there other practices or resources that you tapped into during this time that helped you navigate leadership during a time of great change and turmoil?
I love nurturing relationships. That's why I'm a client person. I've been, client facing my whole career. So just going back to the people, even in, my former life, which was in the bank, and just talking to them, and also hearing and being open to listening around new ideas, but also that, Cate, you're doing a good job. And, I am not good at taking compliments. I never have been. It's just like, okay, great. Now let's move on to the next thing. We've got to go. And my boyfriend, Joe, is always saying, like, take a minute and actually, embrace the good things that you've done, or the changes that you've made, or the pivot, because, we're all running a million miles an hour. And I think I probably never really did that. Getting sick with coronavirus didn't really allow me to do that either, because you're kind of trying to get better and run the company. But I really, again, tapped into having conversations with people in my network, not just the founders and the entrepreneurs and small business owners, but also, again, the bankers, particularly around PPP, and my accountant. And I think those relationships are equally as important as you are not only growing and managing through your business, but what they're doing as leaders. You say beg, borrow, and steal when you're when you're looking at a PowerPoint. Beg, borrow, right? Not steal, but work with each other to help one another. So I'm a huge proponent of, my one tip is, we're all on these Zooms every single day, both internally and externally. Take the opportunity to take a picture of that Zoom. It could be multiple pages, and get the names. So those are people that you can connect with post that Zoom call, and say, hey, I really love what you said, Kristy, or hey, I've been in the same boat. I'm a working mother. These are really, times to actually invest in your network versus pull back.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you did have COVID. What was that experience like? I think many of us do know someone who had COVID. Many don't. And I think as leaders, like, being able to really understand the experiences of our customers, of our peers, of others, in light of what's happening, is a good opportunity for compassion or empathy, or just, the important understanding. I think about that a lot, managing teams, and, some people that I know who had COVID, and it's hard to manage when you don't really fully understand that experience, but I think we all try. So what was your experience like?
Yeah, it was, I think the good news is that, I made it and through, and I never had to be hospitalized. And there were a lot of people like that. I had great access to healthcare, which again shows the disparity in this world. But, it's 5 weeks of just, it was like bronchitis, the flu, and mono kind of hits you at once. That's how my experience, plus lost my sense of smell and taste. I knew that. And I got it right really when we, like a week or two after we shut down the physical space. So we were right in the thick of things, pivoting, going through PPP, everything. There was not really a time to rest, but I had to turn over a lot to my team. And I think that was the best part of this entire pandemic, is really seeing them shine, stepping up every day. And I would never have seen some of the skills and ideas that they've had if this hadn't happened, right? Because you're just running, again, a million miles an hour. You're running the business. You're going forward day to day. This has really allowed them to shine. And as a manager and as a leader, you always want that. You don't necessarily always get the good time. I think it accelerated a lot of learning opportunities for me and my team. But, I probably should have rested earlier and taken my mom's advice and my doctor's advice. And the coronavirus, sort of COVID would have lasted probably shorter. But it was really a tough time to make sure that the business survived even that first critical month and get through the PPP. But hindsight, we always say, listen to our moms and our partners or husbands or whoever, wives. You really do, because the biggest thing I needed was rest, and we're stressed out of our minds anyway. And so, lesson learned for me is next time, really listen to your body. I'm 45, and I didn't realize that until now.
Yeah, good, very good advice. And now that Luminary is opening back up its physical space, and I think many of our listeners are addressing that within their own businesses, if it's having employees come back in or customers, anyone with a physical space, are there, 2 or 3 top takeaways that have really helped guide you during this time, or feedback you've received from customers who are coming back to the space where you think you really hit the nail on the head, you did it the perfect way?
Perfect. I don't know about that, but I think communication, we talked about earlier, has been really, again, critical, right? And we one of the things that I hear often is how well we've communicated, that we didn't leave people in the dark, that, again, open to feedback. I think through not just coronavirus, but all of the racial tensions, the protests, being there for the community, understanding the trauma, understanding the mental health piece, and just being there, and then allowing people to be open too, right? The whole thing is we want you to bring your whole self to your job, to the workplace, to your community, and Luminary is there for that. We launched a series in April called The Lonely CEO, because it's very lonely. We had you, Kristy, on the last live version and in the article. And, whether you're running a company of one, you're a solopreneur, to you're Jamie Dimon, right? At JP Morgan, it is a lonely time. It's a lonely job. And so again, I think a real advice and tips come out of these. And so just giving people access to that around the world is important. But, I'm really excited about the relationships that I think really deepened, like ours, over this time, because you really got the chance to get into it with people and be there for each other, versus, again, you're running from meeting to meeting. Yeah, we're still doing that, but it made me rethink and reimagine what relationships could be.
I love that. All right. So we're talking about reimagining, we're talking about relationships and support. What is the future for you and Luminary, Cate? What are you excited about? I know there's so many unknowns, but we're all looking for, that glimmer of hope, or that, that I don't know if concreteness is the right word, and I don't think we have that right now. But what is really driving you into the future?
For us is, again, being that, sort of beacon of hope, that we're there, we're surviving, and hopefully, again, I don't know about thriving yet, but as we head into 2021, all of our financials went out the window, and as we all hit March. So it gives us time to accelerate things that we probably wouldn't have been able to do. I know the same for Ellevate. So we've accelerated ideas. We've thought of new ideas. We'll make a big announcement in a few weeks about a partnership that we're doing around helping small businesses. So, that's really allowing us the time to think and innovate, which I don't think we would have had prior to this. There's all the negatives that we talked about, and we can think about. I think, my goal as I think about Luminary is continuing to get us through this, so that we're there, because we don't know how long this is going to last. Hopefully we don't have a spike. I think the digital component really focused on, the quality of programming and events and partnerships that we have, where we're, again, adding real value to anybody who physically or digitally walks into our space, and doing that by building, we think, a pretty phenomenal group of women and men that are there to get advice and give advice, inspire and support each other. Investing in yourself is is the biggest act of self-care out there. And we think that Luminary is a great investment in yourself. So that's my focus, and just making sure that we're there for the people that need us. And for me, that's, everyone from the entrepreneur that couldn't launch their business in the middle of COVID to the small business owner that had to completely reimagine and reinvent their business, to the corporate woman that feels lack of visibility because she's working at home, to the working mom that's, how do I homeschool and still get my job done without quitting? So we're just trying to be there for the women and the men that need us.
Great. Well, Cate, thank you so much for joining us today on the Ellevate podcast. It was really great to have you here.
Thanks for having me back, Kristy, and hopefully I get to see you in person soon.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much for listening to Ellevate. If you like what you hear, help a girl out. Subscribe to the Ellevate podcast on iTunes, give us 5 stars, and share your review. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Ellevate NTWK, that's Ellevate Network, and become a member. You can learn all about membership and all the great things that Ellevate Network is doing at our website, www.ellevatenetwork.com. That's ELLEVATE network.com. And special thanks to our producer, Catherine Heller. She rocks. And to our voiceover artist, Rachel Griesinger. Thanks so much, and join us next week.